In May 1945, the war in Europe no longer echoed with gunfire. The Third Reich, with its own grand dreams, had collapsed. This continent was now only a pile of ruins, with devastated cities and buildings turned into heaps of broken bricks. For the infantry soldiers, the war was over. But for intelligence agencies and military engineers, the end of one chapter of history did not mean the end of the struggle. Another war, more unpredictable and more complex, was beginning. As the light of war slowly faded, new shadows of a technological war gradually began to appear. In underground bunkers deep beneath the earth, in dense forests in Bavaria, or in salt mines in Thuringia, Germany did not only hide gold or national assets. They left behind a treasure trove of advanced technology, achievements at least 10, even 20 years ahead of their time. These were not just weapons, but doors opening to futures never before imagined. The Messerschmitt 262, the first jet aircraft, tore through the sky, shocking the world, while the rest of the nations were still fighting in the air with propeller-driven planes. The V-2 rocket, the first weapon to reach the edge of space, shattered the limits of science, while Germany's enemies could not yet imagine such a capability. Designs for swept wings, variable geometry wings, nighttime infrared technology, and innovative metallurgical formulas could not only change the course of war, but could change the future path of humanity itself. For the Allied forces, the question at this moment was not how to destroy these treasures to ensure peace. The real question was how to seize them before the opponent, especially the Soviet Union, could arrive and take control. This video is not about political victories or treaties that we have heard about before. It will take you into covert operations, hunts in the shadows, T-Force, Operation Lusty, and Paperclip. This is not the story of glorious victories or battlefield heroics. This is the story of how the Allies decoded the technological black box of Nazi Germany to lay the foundation for a new world order, a world in which technology could be the decisive factor of power. While major combat formations such as the 1st Infantry Division and the 2nd Armored Division of the United States were busy encircling and eliminating the remaining German forces, another special group, little known to the public, quietly moved into areas not yet liberated, tracking every trace of breakthrough technology. They were T-Force, short for Target Force, a joint British and American unit created for a mission that was little known but critically important. Unlike conventional combat units, T-Force was not tasked with seizing strategic high ground or capturing prisoners of war. They did not seek victory through firepower. Instead, T-Force hunted for targets, but not ordinary ones. The targets they pursued were theoretical research centers, nuclear physics laboratories, design offices, and most importantly, underground factories where top-secret weapons and never-before-seen technologies were produced. For T-Force, this was not merely a race to capture weapons, but a race to possess the future of warfare. Control technique blacklists every T-Force officer carried a notebook known as the blacklists, containing priceless information gathered through years of intelligence collection. This was not a simple list, but the result of a hidden intelligence war where defectors, reconnaissance photographs, and documents seized in earlier operations helped officers map out a highly detailed picture of the targets that needed to be destroyed or captured. These lists did not only contain the names of thousands of Nazi German engineers, but also included the addresses of nuclear physics laboratories, the coordinates of secret weapons storage sites, and breakthrough weapons research facilities that, if they fell into enemy hands, could change the balance of the war. These were weapons of the mind. The race at Nordhausen, an uncompromising hunt. A prime example of T-Force's determination was Mittelwerk, near Nordhausen, where the V-1 and V-2 rockets were produced. This was a massive factory, buried deep inside a mountain, heavily guarded, where the most advanced rockets and weapons were manufactured. According to the Yalta Agreement, this area was to be handed over to Soviet control. However, T-Force and American intelligence units had no intention of letting this technological treasure fall into the hands of Stalin. In a lightning-fast logistical operation, T-Force moved faster than time itself. In just a few days, as Soviet troops were closing in on Nordhausen, American forces mobilized more than 300 railroad cars to remove and transport everything they could. They dismantled V-1 and V-2 rockets, electronic circuit boards, and even specialized machine tools, all of which were collected and shipped back to Allied bases. This was not simply the seizure of weapons. It was an organized act of technical looting, a hunt for critical information and technology carried out in the shadows amid the chaos of war. When Soviet forces finally arrived in Nordhausen, they found only empty tunnels and half-burned drawings. The technological treasure they sought was gone, and the secrets of Nazi Germany had already fallen into Allied hands. T-Force had proven one crucial truth: knowledge is the ultimate prize in modern warfare. The message of T-Force. For T-Force, time was the only currency that truly mattered. The gap between possessing advanced technologies, such as missile guidance systems or other critical weapons platforms, and falling behind an adversary could be measured in mere hours. In that moment, the difference between victor and loser lay not only in military strength, but in the ability to control information and technology. T-Force demonstrated that, in modern warfare, technology is not just what helps you win, it is what decides the war itself. The key to the future was seized not with guns and bullets, but with intellect and decisive action. While T-Force hunted on the ground, Operation Lusty, short for Luftwaffe Secret Technology, was a hunt in the skies. Leading this operation was Colonel Harold E. Watson, who commanded a special team of pilots and engineers known as Watson's Wizards. Men remembered not only for their skill, but also for extraordinary courage in flying the most advanced war machines in the world. The technical paradox. Imagine this. In 1945, most Allied pilots were still familiar only with piston engine, propeller-driven aircraft. Sitting in the cockpit of a Messerschmitt 262, the world's first jet fighter, was an experience that felt like being face-to-face with death. There were no English language manuals, and every instrument panel was labeled in German. The German Jumo 004 engine was extremely unstable. If a pilot pushed the throttle forward too quickly, the engine could catch fire instantly. And, unfortunately for those who had to operate it, the service life of this engine lasted only about 10 to 25 flight hours. Yet, remarkably, Watson's Wizards did not just fly them. They flew these deadly machines through simulated air combat to understand why they were so fast. These pilots not only faced danger while adapting to unfamiliar technology, but also uncovered the hidden power of these designs, opening an entirely new future for aviation. HMS Reaper, the ship that carried the future. To bring these prizes back to the United States, Watson's Wizards used the escort aircraft carrier HMS Reaper, a symbol of mid-ocean technology seizure. On her deck, a collection of aviation marvels was carried across the Atlantic: the Messerschmitt Me 262, the Arado R-234, the world's first jet bomber, and the Heinkel He 162. In total, more than 40 German aircraft were transported to Wright Field, now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which would later become a crucible for Allied aviation technology. Assessing the value. But the Allies did not want these aircraft merely as trophies for display. They wanted to dissect them, to uncover every hidden technical secret developed by Nazi Germany. These aircraft were not just weapons of war. They were pieces of an aviation revolution that, if applied correctly, could completely transform the way wars would be fought in the future. Swept-back wings. American engineers were stunned to realize that German swept-wing designs allowed aircraft to overcome air resistance at high speeds far more effectively than the traditional straight wings used by the United States. This design was not only a theoretical breakthrough, but later became the foundation for supersonic aircraft in the decades that followed. Axial flow jet engines. The principles of airflow inside the Jumo engine were carefully analyzed and became the groundwork for later jet engines developed by General Electric and Pratt & Whitney. American engineers realized that German advances in jet engine technology were not limited to wartime use, but would shape the future of both civilian and military aviation. This control completely transformed aviation thinking. Without the aircraft captured through Operation Lusty, it is very likely that American F-86 Sabres would not have been able to stand toe-to-toe with the MiG-15 during the Korean War just a few years later. This stands as a clear example of how Germany's Iron Birds not only changed the skies, but reshaped global military strategy, leaving the world astonished by the breakthrough technologies that the Allies seized and put into practice. When it came to armored forces, the Allies faced a different reality. While new technologies such as rockets or jet aircraft could be considered weapons of the future, German tanks were machines of the present, trophies whose brutality the Allies had already experienced firsthand on the battlefield. In particular, the Panther and the Tiger, the giants of the ground war, became nightmares for Allied forces throughout the conflict. However, once these trophies were captured, the United States and the Soviet Union adopted clearly different strategies for controlling and exploiting German armored technology. Their approaches were not simply about seizing weapons, but reflected fundamentally different strategic mindsets on how technology should be used to prepare for future wars. The Soviet Union, the strategy of total dismantling. For Stalin, rebuilding Russian industry after the catastrophic losses of the war was the top priority. Going beyond the mere capture of weapons, the Soviet army carried out a strategy of total dismantling. They did not just seize tanks, they seized the ability to produce them. The Soviet Union rapidly dismantled steel foundries and the Maybach engine assembly lines, the very heart of the Panther and Tiger tanks, and transported them to the Ural region. Thousands of German technical workers were also forcibly relocated eastward to rebuild military industry. For the Soviet Union, controlling factories and production technology meant owning the industrial power needed to prepare for a large-scale war in the future. Stalin's long-term vision of accumulating industrial strength helped transform the Soviet Union into one of the leading military powers of the 20th century, especially during the Cold War, when it continued to use the knowledge and technology acquired from Germany to develop new armored forces and weapons. The United States and Britain, the strategy of dissection and selection. By contrast, the United States and Britain did not merely want to seize tanks for battlefield use, they wanted to understand why they were so powerful. They not only captured the weapons, but carefully classified them for detailed study, aiming to extract the maximum technological and tactical value. They established a strict classification system for thousands of abandoned tanks, Type A, the most intact examples, sent to Aberdeen Proving Ground in the United States, or Bovington in Britain for testing, from the strength of the steel armor to its resistance against American 76mm guns. Type B vehicles that were still operational but had limited research value transferred to rebuilding Allied armies such as France and Norway. Type C, heavily damaged vehicles, melted down to recover raw materials for the reconstruction of Europe. Through the dissection and analysis of these tanks, the United States and Britain extracted not only technology, but also tactical lessons. This allowed them to understand the strengths and weaknesses of German armor, improving the design of new tanks and refining tactics for post-war conflicts. The Panther tank paradox, a cold technical acknowledgement. There is one lesser-known but highly revealing episode. After the war, the French army formed the 503 Armored Regiment, using German Panther tanks. This raises an obvious question: why would a victorious nation use the weapons of the enemy that had just occupied it? The answer lay in engineering. The Panther was not just a weapon, but a masterpiece of design. Its unique suspension system, Zeiss optical sights, and the powerful 75mm KWK-42 gun made the Panther superior to any American M4 Sherman of the time. In particular, its suspension and off-road mobility made it a formidable fighting machine, even though it had suffered severe wear during the war. French engineers recognized that the Panther remained a cold acknowledgement of the technical superiority achieved by Nazi Germany. Even after the war, these machines still represented the world standard in armored engineering. The French continued to operate Panther tanks until 1949, a clear admission that German armored technology still surpassed that of the rest of the world at the time. As the Allies pushed deeper into post-war investigations and the collection of spoils, they began to realize a sudden and unsettling truth. The most powerful weapon of Nazi Germany was not steel, nor was it explosives. Germany's true weapon, the one that brought it closest to defeating the rest of the world, was located inside the skulls of its scientists. Steel can be melted down, blueprints can be burned, but creative thinking, research capability, and technical expertise cannot be destroyed unless you possess them. This was the moment when two of the most controversial operations in history began. Operation Paperclip of the United States and Operation Osoaviakhim of the Soviet Union. Above morality. In 1945, during the final days of the war, a secret directive was issued by American intelligence agencies. United States investigators began reviewing the files of German scientists, especially those with high technical value. These individuals were marked with a paperclip in their files, a sign that they would be prioritized for transfer to the United States to serve a greater objective, countering the Soviet Union and advancing weapons technology. Among the most prominent names in Paperclip was one known to nearly everyone, Wernher von Braun, the chief architect of the V-2 rocket. But von Braun was not merely a neutral scientist. He was an SS officer, a man who exploited forced labor in underground tunnels to build weapons that killed thousands of civilians in London during air attacks. However, in the world of technical intelligence, morality often came second to strategic advantage. The United States needed von Braun to confront the Soviet Union in the approaching Cold War. No less significant, the Soviet Union pursued a similar strategy. In a single night in October 1946, Soviet forces forcibly relocated more than 2,000 German engineers to Russia, launching Operation Osoaviakhim to absorb the minds behind Germany's advanced technologies. The results of controlling the brains. Controlling these creative minds produced direct and long-lasting consequences not only in warfare but across science and technology. The space program without Wernher von Braun and his German colleagues, the United States might never have launched the Saturn V rocket that carried humans to the moon in 1969. The techniques developed by von Braun and his team opened the space age, from launch vehicle development to modern aerospace technology. Infantry weapons, another outcome of Paperclip and Osoaviakhim, was research into small arms. For example, the Sturmgewehr 44, the first German assault rifle, was closely studied by Soviet engineers. Despite ongoing ethical debates about the use and purpose of such weapons, Nazi Germany's concept of an intermediate cartridge profoundly influenced the development of the AK-47, one of the most widespread rifles in 20th century military history. The Allies came to understand a crucial lesson to fully control an enemy's weapons. It is not enough to seize the hardware. You must control the very source that creates them. The knowledge, creativity, and expertise of these scientists became the decisive factor not only in war, but in rebuilding military superpowers in the post-war world. The Second World War ended with formal surrenders on paper in Reims and Berlin. But in terms of military technology, it never truly ended. It only transformed. The way the Allies took control of German weapons was not simply about seizing trophies. It was a process of inheriting a technical legacy. What they recovered from piles of twisted steel and dark underground tunnels in 1945 became the first cells in the body of today's modern weapons systems. Every time you see a jet aircraft spreading its wings across the sky, every time a satellite is launched into orbit, or even every time a soldier shoulders a modern assault rifle, somewhere within those designs, traces of the technological race of 1945 still remain. Nazi Germany lost the war in 1945, but its engineering solutions won and survived inside the laboratories of both NATO and the Warsaw Pact for decades afterward. The greatest paradox of history lies here: to prevent a new war, or to prepare for one, the victors had to learn how to become the heirs of the defeated. Among all the technologies the Allies seized from Germany, which weapon do you believe changed human history the most? The V-2 rocket, the Me-262 jet, or the St. G-44 rifle? Leave your opinion in the comments below. If you find this story of military secrets compelling, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel. In the next video, we will explore the fate of the minds behind these machines. What happened to the German generals and scientists after the glory of the Reich faded away? Goodbye for now, and see you again.